You might need to be on Amazon as much as you don't want to because A, your competitors are going to draft off your awareness and be there anyway. B, it's where customers are going to get reviews. And C, it's a built-in trust element.
Well, hello and welcome to another edition of the E-commerce Evolution Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Carey, CEO of OMG Commerce. And today we are talking about literally one of my favorite topics in all of marketing. We're talking about brand building through performance marketing. So I think historically people view those as two separate buckets, two separate worlds, two separate mind spaces. Am I building a brand and creating awareness, or am I doing something that's performance driven, measurable, tangible, ROAS, CPA, things like that? But here's the deal. I think the two are not at odds with each other. I think they go hand in hand. And so if we think about what is building a brand, other than driving demand for your product, allowing you to maintain prices, to build a following, brand building allows you to expand your product line. It creates so many opportunities for you. And performance marketing is really just marketing that gets people to take action and take action relatively quickly. And so my guest today is a pro in this space. She comes from the infomercial world, the direct response TV world, and she's really connected with so many great brands, CPG and other categories. And really few people understand brand building the way she does. And so my guest today is Carey Grange, and she is the Chief Brand Strategist for Growth in the Marketing. And we're going to get to hear some war stories, some good stories of brand building and performance marketing, and how really some lessons and some things that have always been true in marketing, how those apply to today's landscape. It's going to be a ton of fun. And so with that intro, Carey Grange, how's it going? And welcome to the show.
Hi, Brett. Well, thanks, first of all, for having me here. I'm super excited to be here. And I also love talking about building brands through performance marketing. And that's kind of been my background since the beginning of my career. Pretty niche to the beauty space and the wellness space, almost exclusively for CPG. But yeah, really working with brands that are tasked with driving omni-channel growth and finding kind of new ways to intersect, technology and media with where audiences are consuming content and find the financial utility in that. And that's actually how I see performance marketing as just a delivery vehicle for your brand message. And one that generates an ROI. so it can be quite efficient.
And that allows it to be scalable, right? If it delivers a measurable, delivers an ROI, allows it to be scalable. And love that framing. So I want people to get your background just a little bit, and then we're going to talk about some strategies and some tactics here that are very applicable for today. So you got started in the infomercial space. What was that like and why? Like, why did you get into that space?
Yeah, well, it's great. I totally accidentally got into the infomercial space. I actually started my career at Guthy-Renker as a marketing coordinator, and it was the 90s. And, it was shortly after the deregulation of commercial advertising. And so people were able to do direct to consumer marketing and build that long form infomercial format. And it was the wild, wild west. And it was the wild, wild west, I think, similar to the wild, wild west that we're living in today as media continues to change. And so with that, it can be really overwhelming and intimidating and messy, but there's also a lot of opportunities. And so I think for those people who are naturally curious and can figure out how to find the utility in that media to reach audiences and build brand and generate revenue, they're the winners. And so Guthy-Renker, they were pioneers in using long form marketing to build brands. And I like to say, in fact, I was on the inaugural Proactive team, right? Which is like a mega brand, and it sold for a significant multiple to Nestle ultimately. But it didn't start that way. It started as a scrappy brand that was just on infomercial. There wasn't even an e-commerce component to it in the beginning. And so I like to say that became really an accidental brand because we had spent so much TV media on it. with the sole
Right.
intent of driving revenue, of acquiring customers and pulling them down an acquisition funnel and getting them to subscribe and to stick for as long as possible. And that was the objective. And then to find other brands that you could plug into that model. Um,
Yeah, it's super interesting because I think the proactive story, where it was just strictly a DRTV play in the beginning, very
yeah.
similar to strictly D2C brands today. So your
Hmm.
Shopify e-commerce brands that are just driving sales through Meta and Google and other places, now expanding to other channels and then eventually wanting a big exit. I mean, that's really what proactive did. But back in the day, pre Shopify and all that. So just as a
Yeah.
bit of a frame of reference, so Guthrie Ranker, if anybody's been in the direct marketing space, they know that name. But they were
Yeah.
like the best of the best in the infomercial space. So you mentioned Proactive. That's one of their best known brands. What are the other brands that were part of the Guthrie Ranker family that will kind of give people context?
Yeah, I mean, the ones that I think people will know the best today would be Proactive, Meaningful Beauty, which is Cindy Crawford's hair care line, Crepe Erase, which is a body line of products that deals with crepey skin for the aging woman. When Hair Care by Chaz Dean was another one. They had a partnership with It Cosmetics. They were part of that brand and had the exclusive direct-to-consumer distribution rights for that brand. Those are some pretty big ones that they're
Yeah,
that they're
those are
well
great.
known for. Yeah, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
it's such a good point. It, it was first of all, it was an incredible foundation to start there, and to learn the industry from the ground up, and to understand like tracking and analytics, and to even be like boots on the ground when you're adding a URL to a TV commercial for the very first time and gasping in fear over like
yeah.
how are you going to do the attribution modeling? But we didn't even call it
Right, right.
attribution modeling. We didn't know what to
Will
call it
anybody
yet.
buy
It was
online? What are we going to do if they don't call in? Yeah.
yeah, or no, the scarier part was, will they buy online, and how are we going to know the impact of our TV
Mm,
commercial? And it's
mm.
exactly the dilemma that brands have today, which is, what
Yeah,
is the
yeah.
impact of our spend? If we're spending over here, but we're getting the
Yep.
revenue over there, how do we know its impact? And so, of course, again, that was before attribution modeling, but even today, attribution modeling is only so intelligent. And
Totally.
so, and it becomes, you and I have talked about it before. It becomes increasingly complicated because the more fragmented media is, the more
Totally.
specialized each one of those channels are, the harder it is to keep all of those entities talking to each other, and then to know how to look at those activities on a granular level, but then to understand how they're rolling up to your P&L ultimately, which is the objective
Yeah.
of the brand owner, is to drive a healthy P&L.
Totally.
Um,
And it's one of those things that's just the age old marketing question. How do we understand what's working? How much is it working? What's really driving growth? So, what's driving incremental sales? What's more of a support medium? How does all
right.
this tie together? And I do think it's easier now than maybe it was in the early days, but I don't know. There's a lot of confusion. So, we'll dive into attribution and some of those topics here just a little
Yeah.
bit. One thing I would
Yeah.
love to know, because you nailed it when you said, hey, all of this has to feed into the P&L. And I think that's been one of the big resets in the D2C and e-commerce space, is that, like pre-pandemic and certainly during the hyper growth stage of the pandemic, when everybody was ordering online, it was like grow. We'll figure out profits later. It's going to happen, whatever. To now, e-commerce brands know we have to be a real business. This
Yeah.
all has to feed into a healthy P&L. And so marketing must drive business objectives. What are some of the things you learned in the infomercial space? Because I know those, infomercial marketers or DR brands, like they are dialed in. What are some of the principles you learned, or some of the fundamentals you learned from a finance side, P&L side, that make
Yeah.
for a healthy DR business?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd love to just step back a little bit and kind of frame it up in the context of where I
Great.
probably spent the
Yeah.
largest chunk of my career, which was actually at Murad. And the reason I bring
Mm-hmm.
that up is that was a true omni-channel business model.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what we're finding, like these pure play
Totally.
brands, like you were saying, that were
Yeah.
launched during the pandemic, and really it was such an exciting time of entrepreneurialism. And as much as we see kind of these unicorn moments of like fast rise brands on TikTok and fast rise brands through Shopify and all these other areas, we've also seen a lot of brand failures because they don't understand how to run the business side of things. They don't know
Right.
how
Right.
to scale, and they reach that point of diminishing return. And so in fact, I
Or
read a
their
statistic.
single channel, single source of new customer acquisition.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
something fundamentally shifts there, then they're in real trouble. And so
Yeah.
there's also dangers to expanding channels and expanding customer acquisition channels. But
Yeah. So
most of the
what should that
successful
look
brands
like?
we
Yeah.
see are totally. Most of the brands we see though are going multi-channel or omni-channel. I do believe that's where you maximize value, and whether that's just to have a long sustaining profitable business or to have a successful exit, like you got to be multi-channel. So you got to be more than just D2C. So probably D2C,
Yeah.
marketplace, and retail, or some combination thereof. So,
Well,
so Murad,
100%.
omni-channel
Yeah.
brand, go ahead. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
perfect because what you're trying to do is go, where is my customer? And so you're always
Yep.
looking
Yep.
for market
And how do they
fit,
want to buy?
right? If you're building a brand, what's the market fit? So how do they want to buy? So if you're really being customer centric, then that will drive your media strategy. That will drive your
Yeah.
distribution strategy. And so often you're right, that singular channel is not enough. And that's actually not how customers are buying. And so one of the risks then is you are spending money and creating category awareness and brand awareness that you're not actually picking up then where your customers are making purchase decisions and actually making that purchase, and your competition will draft off of that and pick that up, those clever marketers. So if your objective is, hey, I just want to sell some stuff through this channel that I'm really good at, cool. But if you want to build a brand and really grow something and scale it as much as you can, which is usually the name of the game of the people that I deal with, and I imagine
Absolutely.
the clients that you bring into OMG Commerce, then you really are looking at an omni-channel strategy. And then you want to go, okay, what are my channels of distribution, and how is the media that I'm spending being spent as efficiently as possible? But by efficient, I mean it's returning an investment on that direct spend. But it's also pushing the sell through in all of our other channels because it's an all ships rise. And so that's why I like to kind of joke about the accidental brand build of Proactive. The brand building at Murad wasn't as accidental. It was actually quite strategic. Right. And so I often like to talk about brands are really good at knowing their what. This is my product. And a lot of innovators are so great at that. And they're great at knowing why. I wanted to develop this because. But what's missing is the how. How am I now going to build this business? And that's where strategy comes in. And I have noticed that in today's marketplace, a lot of brands are playing in tactics. I need to be on YouTube. Yep. I need to be on Amazon. I need to be in Meta. I need to have social organic. And there's all of these activities happening on, and it gives the illusion of growth. But the reality is it can lead to bloated infrastructures, a bunch of cross-channel conflict, and ultimately an impotent marketing spend that isn't having impact, that isn't realizing the growth that you need. So at Murad, we went into infomercial as a strategy. And in fact, I was recruited specifically to launch an infomercial for the business. And it was kind of revolutionary at the time. And having come from Guthy-Ranker, I was super excited because I had only worked on beauty brands at Guthy-Ranker. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to go work for a real beauty company. Murad, they're in spas and salons, they're going into retail. Well, my counterparts were not as excited about me being there. I did not get a warm reception because the only people that wanted me there were the Murad family members, were Dr. Murad and our CEO, Richard Murad, who's his nephew. And so they hired me.
Did the rest of the team see you as competition, or they just saw you as like some kind of alien? Like, what are you doing? We've got our stuff together.
They saw me as the person who was going to denigrate the brand. How can you bring in this lowbrow, cheesy format into our business? And so
our
of course I was
more sophisticated. Our buyers will not respond to this lowbrow, low class DR, direct response type ad. So
exactly. But the Murads were like, figure it out. I think what I did right in that situation, and is a learning to apply to today's landscape too, is to then get really curious and understand why. So how could this potentially be an obstacle to your retail growth? And then how do we overcome that? And so in those days, production values, for example, was a big part of it, right? So we had to be really careful not to have the cheesy bells and the whistles and the dings and the, the dot wacky stuff, like the sound effects, right? It needed to be elegant and high end, but it also needed to do what an infomercial does. And what an
Right.
infomercial does is, or did, they're not as many. They're still out there. There's not as many of them anymore.
Still out
But
there.
what they
Still out there.
they're still out there. But what they do is what we need today's performance media to do, which is to get your audience to stop. It's the thumb stop, it's the
Hmm.
stop the scroll,
Hmm.
it's to take action. If the TV's on in the background, it's to, ooh, I'm listening to that headline. How do I stop, turn around, take notice, and create need, and then pull them down an acquisition funnel? So there's a lot of skill involved actually with getting an audience who's
Without
bombarded
doubt.
with
Yeah.
information and a lot of external inputs to stop and say, oh, I'm curious about this. I want to learn more. I might need this. And then to actually get them to make a transaction, it's pretty powerful. So we needed to do creatives that did that, but that also were
Hmm.
aligned with the brand message. Now, in our omni-channel environment, so we had an infomercial, we had a website which was not optimized at all, and that's a whole nother story about how you build a D2C business
Sure.
from a
Sure.
technology and an infrastructure standpoint within a brand. It's a monstrous task, although much less expensive and easier to execute in today's landscape with so
Way
many
easier
open source
now, for sure.
solutions.
For sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
I'm
but it's
curious though, just real
yeah.
quick, why did the Murads want to do DR TV? So, or why they want to do an infomercial? So, I mean, they're omni-channel, they're growing, things are good, and their team didn't want it. Why did they want to do an
Well, yeah,
infomercial?
they had an early experience with infomercial where the sales were just explosive, and so they really wanted
Mm,
to drive the growth of the brand. Period. They knew the value
got
of
it.
it. So then, what we were tasked with is going, well, what channels of distribution are we in? How do we support
Hmm.
those channels of distribution while also making sure that this channel of distribution, which was the infomercial, which we looked at as a
Hmm.
sales channel in that organization, in addition to a marketing function, so it had a cross functionality. How do we make sure that it has all of the sales promotion and the elements that it needs to perform? And so that's what we set out to do. And we launched an infomercial, and it was multifunctional in its benefits. It created brand awareness. It
Yep.
educated the customer. And I'm circling back to answer your initial question, which was, what did you learn that's relevant today? And that is, what are those
Hmm.
elements, right? It communicated an authentic founder story, which I'd say to this day is,
Still
you
powerful
know,
today. Yeah,
it's
without a
still
doubt.
powerful today, and it's a really powerful trust element, and that's what customers are looking for. Um, it showed that we solved a problem, and in today's marketplace, again, people are looking to have their problems solved. So in our case, it was, we were clearing acne, we were addressing, hyperpigmentation on the skin, we were addressing fine lines and wrinkles. Um,
Hmm.
we were able to communicate a transformation benefit, which is, if you use this, you will get this result. So again, that can be shown through a problem solution, but transformation can also be shown through emotion. And that's the value of
Totally.
testimonials. So we were able to use testimonials, which in today's day and age is influencers and
Yeah.
reviews.
UGC. Totally.
It's
Yeah.
UGC and it's your reviews. It's the social proof.
Yep.
So again, the
Yep.
infomercials have that social proof as part of it. But that again is a really powerful trust element for customers. Oh, it worked for them. Maybe it'll work for me. And that also had the function of that person then being able to communicate, here's how this changed my life. So it's one thing to just
Yeah.
show a person with clear skin and you're like, okay, that looks efficacious. Maybe it'll work for me. But if you have a testimonial who now with great emotion is
Right.
like, I feel beautiful again. I can go out with
Totally.
confidence. I went on a date. There's a transformation message that's quite powerful and is still powerful in today's media landscape. We were able to show the proof, scientific claims, and I can kind of break down further what that formula is. But ultimately, it became a sustaining advertising vehicle that drove the overall growth of the Murad brand. And it drove significant sales for Sephora and Ulta, placing us as the number one clinical skincare brand in both of those channels. And at the same time, it was in its own channel quite profitable. And
Yep.
and we were able to acquire customers, and it was great from a cash flow standpoint for us because well, I should say from a margin standpoint, it was a tricky cash flow model because we would deficit finance the acquisition of our customers.
Got it. Yep,
Um,
yep, yep.
but it's also a real time collectible, right? When you're selling direct to consumer, and it had better
Totally.
margins because we
You're getting the
weren't selling at a
cash right
wholesale.
away, or at least that initial sale right away.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I do want to kind of break down that formula because I think that'd be super valuable. I think it totally applies to today. But I think what's really important to point out here is that, yeah, you were running this infomercial. It was driving direct sales, either on the phone or someone ordering online, which was kind of new-ish at that time. But then it was also driving tons of sales in Sephora and Ulta, making you a top seller there. We see
That's
the
right.
same thing here, right? If you've got a killer YouTube campaign, meta campaign, you're doing something OTT or whatever, it's going to drive direct sales on your .com, but it's also going to create great lift on Amazon if you're selling on Amazon. It's going to drive retail sales if you're doing that. And so, these principles apply. But what are some of those elements? What's that formula look like?
Yeah. Well, so, from Murad, I actually went and ended up launching a beauty brands incubator, and Guthrie Ranker
Mm-hmm.
ended up being mine and my partner's investment partners in the brand. So it was a Guthrie
Mm-hmm.
Ranker beauty brand incubator. And when we would look at brands that we could acquire and do various different like JV and licensing deal structures with, and
Mm-hmm.
we had a very
Mm-hmm.
specific, I guess, lens of what we would look for from these brands to be like, these are going to be
Nice.
powerful
Okay.
performance marketing brands. And it's what worked for us in the proactive days. It's what worked in Murad. And it's what I see when we evaluate brands today. And I imagine the ones that you're seeing so effective with your business model of that YouTube top of funnel, and that you can then pull down that kind of acquisition funnel, push to Amazon. I imagine they have similar attributes. What I would say is they just happen at different times now. So it might be parsed out a little bit differently. So whereas an infomercial or a longer format might have all of these elements, now I would say,
Sure.
does the brand have these elements? And at what point in
Yeah.
the customer journey do you bring these elements to the table? So I have my notes here. So the first one
That's
I already
excellent.
mentioned,
Love
which
that.
is that authentic founder story. And if you don't have a founder,
Yeah.
can you have a founding story? This product exists for these reasons. Are you able to communicate that? Because customers will resonate with that. It's a powerful trust element. It has to
And
solve
let me
a
just give you
problem.
I want to give you a quick example here too, Carey, because I think this illustrates the point nicely. We were just evaluating a pet brand. It's a pet brand actually probably quite a few people have heard of that are listening. And they had some killer, funny, engaging, multiple actors. Like you're laughing, you're watching, you see cats in the thing, and you're like, that's a great ad. They also had a very, very simple founder, direct to camera. But this founder is passionate about cats and passionate about this product and how it helps cats. Very simple production quality. But I'm telling you, the CPA was very similar between that brand, that founder's story, simple, low-cost video, and some really high production value ads as well.
I love
I think the
that.
high production value probably has a greater upside, like it's probably more scalable. But man, founder stories, they still work. Do not overlook them.
It's I love the product so much I bought the company message, right? Remember
Yeah,
those from the 70s
yeah.
and the 80s
I'm
growing
not just
up?
I'm not just a hair club for men
I'm
president.
also
I'm
a
also the customer.
customer.
Whatever.
Yeah. That's
Totally.
exactly it. There's
Yeah.
just such credibility behind it. I
Yep.
give this to my own children. I made this
Mm-hmm.
out of
Mm-hmm.
this need. And because of
Yeah.
that, we believe you. It's a strong trust
Yep.
element. We think you've got our back. There's a real live person or a real life message
Totally.
behind it.
Totally.
We also know that purpose is really important for people. So again, in the absence
Mm-hmm.
of a founder story, if you can have a founding story, a reason for being, I
Mm-hmm.
think that's really
Like
important.
that.
And if you don't have it, come up with one. And I will say we brought
Yep.
in brands that had really great technologies, and we actually created a founding story behind it. We saw this need, we took our backgrounds, we've created it, and
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
bringing it to you. So have
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
founding
So
story,
smart.
100%.
Love
And
it.
it gives you great storytelling about your
Yep.
brand. And that's ultimately what you're trying to
Yeah.
do, is that you want there
And
to
that's
be
what
a
a good
reason to
infomercial is,
believe.
right? That's what a good ad is. It's a good story. It's storytelling for sure.
It's
So,
what a
uh,
good YouTube ad is. Actually, I was watching one of
yep.
your YouTube trainings, and it broke for a commercial, and it went to Chuck Norris's wife talking about this product that they developed that came out of her needs and his advocacy for her
Mm-hmm.
and staying by her bed. It was a great story. And now you're like, ooh,
Mm.
what is it? I want to know more. Maybe it's great for me.
Totally. Totally.
So yeah,
Love that. Love
um,
that. So founder
it
story, that's one element.
solves a problem. It addresses a pain point. And the pain
Yep.
point could be something like, I have acne, I want to lose weight, I want to grow hair, I want to
Hmm.
lose hair, I want to remove hair. Whatever it may be, what's that pain point?
Yep.
The other thing is it needs to be transformational, and that's either
Mm.
visual or emotionally, but it needs to be something you can communicate through your media. And maybe that's through users, maybe that's
Hmm.
through a celebrity endorsement, maybe that's through your reviews, but ultimately, are you seeing lives transform? I feel more confident. I feel more beautiful. I have more time with my children. I'm achieving financial freedom, whatever it may
Yep.
be. People aren't buying stuff, they're buying an outcome to make their life better. And so transformation is a really important emotional hook
And it's really
for
transformation
clients.
that you can see and feel, right? It's transformation that the buyer, the consumer can see and feel. And then it also needs to be a transformation that you can convey in a way where people watching can see and feel it.
Yeah, it's
Hmm.
engaging and it's emotional, and I
Hmm.
do think there's this subconscious attachment to your brand that forms as well, and a
Yeah.
real positive brand affinity that comes with transformation.
Mm.
It's inspiring. Um, proof Proof is really important. Proof can come in a lot of different ways. Obviously, befores and afters are really powerful. Scientific claims, did we study? Is there a study behind an ingredient? Is there research?
Yep.
Is there, we put X amount of people on this? Is a subjective claim 100% agree that they experienced X with this? But that proof, and again, you're probably not going to lead with proof and a thumb scroll, but if you're starting to pull them down a funnel, make sure that you have that proof, because again, these are all really powerful trust elements in your
Totally.
creatives. um, and then social proof. And
Mm.
we see now, like, it's the old school infomercial, but it's the user generated content, it's the influencer, it's the reviews, where people genuinely believe it's going to work for them. And so I don't think I need to, like, beat the drum of social proof to this crowd, because I think we all actually really understand the value of social proof in today's day and age. I think, if anything, it's more, how do we use that social proof now as part of our
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
campaign? So,
Yep.
so I,
And I
I
think
like
just
talking about those strategies.
one thing I'll double click on there, which I think is important, is I remember when I was getting started in TV, like in the early 2000s, I would hear people say, "Oh, testimonials don't work," right? And now there's a little bit of a trend
Wrong.
towards people saying UGC doesn't work. And I think the
Mm,
only principle I would underscore there, the only nuance there, is that bad testimonials don't work and boring
that's correct.
UGC doesn't work. But the
That's
real
correct.
stuff, the stuff from real customers where they're conveying their story and their emotions and you can feel the authenticity, that works now. It worked 20 years ago, 50 years ago, and I think it will always work, right? It's just the
It
lame or
will
boring stuff that
always
doesn't work.
work. I would wager my house on it that it's important. And I
Yeah.
think you raised a really
Yeah.
good point. It's the quality of it. And I'll give you an example. We have, in infomercials, we would test removing, or on a website, and other forms of creative, we would test moving different testimonials in and out. And sometimes a testimonial in and of itself, it can be a lever mover, a dial mover
Mm-hmm.
for a campaign, adding
Totally.
them or removing them. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think you're right. And I think we're also living in a day and age where we put so much pressure on the immediate performance of our ads, that if something doesn't work, we kind of make this sweeping judgment. This does not
Yeah,
work. When
exactly. Exactly.
we and
I
and
made a
so what
UGC mashup. It didn't work, and you're like, "Well, yeah, but
Yeah, so
you didn't
UGC
execute
doesn't work.
properly. Didn't run it. Yeah, right, right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah. And so
cool.
so so strategically, the value of working with agencies is you have to test. Not everything is going to
Yeah,
work. And that's what
yeah, yeah.
traditional performance marketers do, is they're always testing, and you never rest on your laurels. You,
Totally,
you keep
totally.
you keep
Because
testing and
every
trying new creatives.
offer, every ad, every angle, everything you test eventually will stop working. So you always got to be finding the next thing. So you
Yeah.
talked about social proof, other elements that you're looking
Yep.
for
Value. You
here.
just brought it up. Your offer, a
Mm,
value proposition. And value and
totally.
offer are two, they're not necessarily, mutually exclusive. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
Having a good offer is very important, and an offer can and will make or break your campaign. And I do believe offers need to be refreshed. But oftentimes what's standing between you and success is a really compelling offer, but a value proposition. And value can come in a lot of different ways. And value is not synonymous with discounting. So I think, again, when
Yes.
you're in a
Yes.
world of offers and sales promotion, the first thing that a lot of brands do is they discount. And that's another
Mm,
fear of being in the performance marketing space, is they don't want to discount because, again, they're afraid it's going to denigrate their retail brand. But discount and value are not the same. So how do you build
yeah.
up and create that value for your customer? And so that
And that's
value
just really where
proposition.
where the perceived benefit of the product outweighs the monetary cost, right? Like what else would you say about value? How do we create value apart from discounting?
Yeah, well, value can come in different ways. So among them being, are you giving me more time in my day? There's value to
Hmm.
that. Are you replacing multiple products that I'm already using with this
Yeah.
single step?
Yeah.
There's value to that. Is it highly concentrated and I'm not, and I can add water at home and I'm not paying these
Hmm.
big,
Hmm.
heavy shipping fees, which is negatively impacting the environment? There's value to that. Do you have a
Hmm.
give back program to someone else? Oh, that's really important to me. That makes me feel good about being part of your
Right. Right.
brand. Tom's Shoes, one
Yeah.
for one. There's value to that. So there's lots of ways
Totally.
to create value without discounting.
Yeah. I wanted the shoes anyway, but now that I know I've got a little bit of philanthropy or I'm helping kids in need or something now, that allows me to justify the purchase.
Yep.
So love that discussion on value. And I'm really glad you framed it that it does not have to be a discount, it does not have to be coupons. You do not have to cheapen your brand, but you
Yeah.
do have to create value.
You have to create value and then demo. And of course, that's what's so great
Mm,
about a place like YouTube, where you
yeah.
can show how the product works. And just for whatever reason, what's coming to mind is, and some of your older viewers might remember Bare Essentials or Bare Minerals. It was a color cosmetic brand, and
Hmm.
it was a loose powder format, which was kind of different at the time. And they were experiencing high returns because customers didn't know how to use it, and it was messy. And so in their ads, they would do the you swirl, tap, buff. Well, by the time it got to the retail shelf, or even when they shipped it to the customer, they understood how to use the product. And
Swirl
so
tap buff. Easy. Feels easy.
demonstration
Sounds
is a
easy.
really, I know how to use it, which means my
Hmm.
compliance is going to be higher, which means my satisfaction in the product is going to be greater, which means I'm going to achieve better results, and I'm less likely to make a return or leave a negative review. So is there demonstration, and then of course education,
Yeah.
and those can often be one and the same. So again, you might
Yeah.
see maybe that's not necessarily on your leading media, but if you pull them down like a long scroll landing page, you might see some demonstration in there about here's how you use it, and that's really valuable.
Yeah, and we think that's a key component. If you're designing YouTube ad creatives, the demonstration piece is absolutely critical. I would say the same is true for Meta and TikTok as well. So, yeah, to your point, if someone sees it in action, I swirl tap buff, if that was what
Buff.
you said, if I got that right.
I can't believe that came to me. That
Then
was so old, but yeah,
that was
it was
great. Yeah,
effective.
yeah. So, but like I remembered it, and that's not even like my product type of thing. And so, one, I think it makes it easier to say yes to the purchase because now I see, oh, this is pretty easy, right? When we were running Boom by Cindy Joseph, one of Ezra Firestone's brands, they had
So
Boom
great.
Stick, which is kind of like a makeup stick that it could replace your whole makeup bag. And so when they would do the demo, it's like, hey, you choose one of these 3 sticks. You just apply it here, then you put it on your lips, and like the demo is super easy. You're like, that's it. That's all I have to do. And now I don't have to wear any other makeup if I don't want to. And so seeing that demonstration, I think removes or reduces the buyer hesitation, helps you overcome objections. But then to your point, it ensures you use it properly. You're more satisfied with it. So more likely to leave a good review, less likely to return the product. And so demonstration is really valuable. And one thing I've heard, I'm curious your perspective on this because I don't know that this fully applies to the beauty. I think it kind of doesn't, but I've heard, like a Flex Seal. That's another example of start as an infomercial. Now it's become a bit of a brand, right? Like this spray on stuff that you can use to
Mm.
seal your pots around your house, your gutters or whatever. there's this concept of like a magic demo, right? Where he like
Mm.
sprays Flex Seal on the bottom of his truck and then he drives it into water and it floats or whatever.
I love a
So
magic
what?
demo. Yeah. A visual
Yeah,
hammer. We call those visual hammers. Like, how are you
visual hammers. Yeah,
showing, yeah, that this is
yeah.
how it works?
Right. So you'll
And
never use it in this capacity, but if it's good enough to do this, think what it will do for you just as you're sealing your pots or whatever.
oh my gosh,
So how do you
Ozempic.
apply
When
that
is
to
a
beauty? Yeah.
hundred? Yeah, I was gonna say Ozempic. When is $130 too much to spend on a weight loss product? You
Mm,
know, if you don't have 5 or 10 or more pounds to lose, right? So then you're like, oh my gosh, if the Ozempic was
yeah.
like the biggest audience for it was people who had more like 5 to 10 pounds to lose, because if it's gonna help someone lose 80 pounds, then it's going to
Mm,
help me get my last 5 off, right? So those extremes can be really, really
yeah.
powerful. But the boom
Yes.
stick is
Yes.
the perfect example. You guys did so many things right with that, because
Hmm.
there was a
Hmm.
compelling, and I watched it. There was a compelling
Yep.
founder story, but then you did the other thing that's really important was they filled a white space. They weren't,
Yeah.
look, it was makeup in a stick.
Hmm.
Brilliant, right? So like that doesn't exist already. So it was taking something that
Hmm.
already exists, it's applying it in a way that, because that's the other piece, is it needs to fit into someone's regular routine. Women apply makeup
Yep.
already. It hits an emotional pain point, which is, I'm an older demographic, I have these concerns, I'm feeling older, I am looking older, no one's making anything for me, traditional makeup is going to sit in my fine lines and wrinkles, no one's making anything for me.
Hmm.
Boom stick to the rescue. It's simple, it fits into your routine, it's specifically formulated for fine lines and wrinkles, so it's not going to sit in there. Here's how you use it. Less is more. It's going to make you not look as aged. Now you've hit my pain points. I have a founder story. You've demonstrated
Yep.
it. It's inclusive. You have a real broad demographic of users. And that's the other thing that's mission critical in today's day and age. So it was, first of all, it was older women. You had,
Yep.
in addition to the founder who is Caucasian, you had an African American, you had an
Yep.
Asian,
Yep.
right? It was showing the range of skin tones that it worked for. And it was
Hmm.
really representative of that customer. And then there was value, because this is replacing all of those other things. You didn't have to discount it. So I would say with that campaign, you just you crushed all of these things, and through your channels of distribution. And it caught my attention 100%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
So
then
good.
the other
So
thing
good.
that you brought up, so does it fill that white space? For us, we were always looking for something that was replenishable. Can you get people into
Hmm.
a continuity? And that might fit into the offer component. And then the trust. Are there easy returns? So in addition to the founder story, which is a
Hmm.
powerful trust element, and all of the things that we know to do about easy pay and all of those things, a money back guarantee, are there easy returns? I think that's why channel
You're
strategy
removing the
is.
risk, right? You're taking away the risk that a customer may perceive about making the purchase and just lowering the barrier to say yes.
Yeah, and my feeling is back in back in the olden days, it, that might come through easy returns and money back guarantee. Today, that
Hmm.
might determine your channel strategy, which is you might need to be on Amazon as much as you don't want to, because A, your competitors are going to draft off your awareness and be there
Yes.
anyway.
Yes.
B,
Yep.
it's where customers are going to get reviews. And C, it's a built-in trust element. I know I can return here. So
Right.
there's the
Right.
value and there's the convenience. But so again, that's where channel strategy kind of rolls into all of these attributes that I
Yeah,
talk
really good
about.
point. And
So
just to kind of put a bow on the Boom by Cindy Joseph story there. So or it's Boom Beauty is the brand now, but we helped them launch on Amazon a few years ago, and they were leaning heavy into Meta. We were running YouTube and Google, and so the new customer acquisition channels were on fire, but they were not on Amazon. Well, some other brands had kind of built up, launched on Amazon, and were kind of squatting on the brand name of Boom. Like they were just
yes,
selling products, capitalizing on that. So when we launched them on Boom, and there were headwinds and there were difficulties, and like we did some ad strategies on Amazon, and so there was pretty comprehensive what we did there. But they went from zero to almost $6 million in sales on Amazon the first year, and it did
that's
not
incredible.
cannibalize their core business. Now,
No,
I think a lot of that was just pent up demand. A lot of it was we opened up a new channel and we're able to grow that as a standalone as well. But yeah, you got to be thinking about these other channels. I know there's still some cases where it makes sense to not be on Amazon, but you've got to really think that through. For most brands, you got to be there.
I think for most brands, you have to be there. It's a necessary
Yeah,
evil for all of those reasons. And to your point, you're otherwise creating demand for your competition. And
totally, totally.
and yeah, it's a
Yeah,
bummer. And I feel the same way about paid search, right? You can put all of this effort into your meta advertising, into your YouTube advertising, and customers are still going to go to search. And if you're not buying your branded term, which is just
yep, yep,
frustrating, someone else will. So
yep.
how do you keep owning that? And so again, that kind of goes back to the brand side of things is like, and you and I talked about this too, why I really value agency partnerships. Um, you need to really understand all of those variables, and you need to lean into the wisdom and the guidance and the experience in these respective channels that
Yes,
your
yes,
agencies have, but also listen in terms of the education, in terms of what type of repetition do you need, where should you be taking risks, like going into an Amazon versus not. um, Fine tuning your marketing messaging, your offer. You're never going to hit it out of the gate ever. And then
right,
once you
right.
do fine tune it and nail it, you're going to have to keep updating that anyway. And so build into your budget and into your strategy and into your planning that that kind of slush fund and that time to always be learning and refining and testing, because every time you do land on that magic mix, you kind of want to, hit the gas and optimize that as much as possible while you're
Totally,
running that
totally.
parallel path of getting the next thing going.
Yeah, yeah.
It's a unicorn experience to nail it all at once. It's very rare. And so I think where a lot of brands miss is like, again, this didn't work in this configuration, I'm out, it doesn't work. And the reality
Right.
is, if you're in the ballpark, you can fine tune it and you can get it there, and you will be
Yes,
able to scale your
yes.
brand and drive total channel growth 100%.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's really good. And so kind of those elements, if you've got them all and you're still not quite there, it's not quite hitting your goals or your targets, and you need to refine. And maybe that the thumb stopper, the scroll stopper wasn't quite on point, or it's maybe you're telling the founder story, but it's missing an element, it's missing some emotion to it. Or maybe you've got UGC, but it's not the right UGC, or maybe you're showing some value, but it's not landing. And so I think that's where you gotta test, you got to iterate, you got to get feedback from other people that are in your market. But if the
Totally.
elements are there, it should work. You just got to keep iterating. And so one thing I'll say, and we're about out of time, when it comes to having this slush fund or like this test fund, I've heard different brands have different philosophies. Google called it for their employees, they call it like the 20% time. Hey, do your core job, but then take 20% of your time and explore, do wild stuff, invent the next Gmail or the next other, billion user product or whatever. I know some
Yeah.
brands will say, hey, we're going to take 10% of every channel's budget, and we're going to try wild stuff. We're going to try just experimental, right? So that, because we're going to land on something, most of that will not work. We're going to occasionally land on something that will be a moonshot. And if you're not always testing something, your core stuff's going to die, and then you're not going to have anything left. But any perspective on that slush fund or test budget, or however you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. So I've looked at slush fund a couple different ways. So one of them is when you have a working campaign, let's say at Murad,
Mm-hmm,
we're
mm-hmm.
humming, we've got all the channels going. There was always 10% of slush that was going toward newness. What else can we be testing,
Yep.
iterating, whatever? In different environments, like for example, when I was doing consulting work for Guthrie Ranker, prior to us launching the incubator together, there was a resource allocation to innovation. And I got
Mm-hmm,
to be a
mm-hmm.
part of that, which is we can't be competing for resources. We have these 100, 200, $400 million a year brand. We have a function-based
Right.
organization. So good luck if you're trying to innovate and create new. And ultimately, that's how we ended up investing in the incubator. Or they invested in the incubator that
Mm-hmm,
I ended up
mm-hmm.
running with my business partner, was because they realized it's a very different uh, uh, budget, skill set, mindset, resource allocation than what's required to run your core brand. And so some brands will do it within their company, and I've seen a lot of companies actually just create full-on incubator
Got it.
environments. If you can create an incubator
Yeah.
environment within your company, cool. But I like that 20% idea, which is just always facilitating that new creativity. And what's great about that is what you're learning there, you then apply to the core business. And so I like that
Totally.
always
Yeah.
be
Even if
learning.
something is always be learning, even if it doesn't totally hit, you'll almost always learn something. There'll be some happy accidents. There'll be the accidental brand or the accidental strategy that, hey, we were testing this, but we learned something else. And so, yeah, I think you've always got to be testing.
And
So
I
maybe
know
it's
we
10
have
to
to
20%,
go,
somewhere in
but
there.
that's it. I know we have to go, but like that's the thing. Like if you're not always learning, you're missing the next thing that's happening and things are moving so quickly. And so again, that's where your agency partnership is mission critical because when you're busy running your brand, you just can't have your finger on the pulse of how technology is evolving. What you do know is what your business objectives are and who your customer is and what your brand is and what you stand for. And then you can partner with your agency on those strategies and what levers you're going to pull to roll up to that P&L objective.
100%.
So,
yeah. And for the record, I did not pay Carey to throw in those plugs for working with your agency, but we both just believe it's true, right? For the right brand. Some brands do well with in-house teams. I think that requires another skill set and it's really hard and it probably fits for a certain, large size brand. But man, lean on your agencies. Lean on your agencies because they do bring a wealth of knowledge. For sure.
I credit some of my agencies over the tenure of my career with the success of some pretty big campaigns. It would be arrogant to suggest that I did it all by myself. I mean, it's 100% a team effort. And so lean into the skills, the expertise, the passion of those outsourced solutions. And from a P&L management standpoint, oftentimes those costs then can be variable to your fixed expense. So that's
yes.
too.
Awesome. Carey Grange, ladies and gentlemen, Chief Brand Strategist, Growth Envy Marketing. So if you're listening to this and you're like, dang, I need some strategic help, some brand growth help. I need someone like Carey to help tie things together for me. How can people get in touch with you, Carey? And what's the best way for them to start that dialogue?
Oh my gosh, thank you. I mean, first of all, I'm on LinkedIn like everyone else. So my name is probably spelled on here somewhere, Carey, Carey Grange. And growthenvymarketing.com is our website. And yeah, we love working with founder brands. We love working with startups. I love working with legacy brands who are looking to inject newness and life and growth into an existing brand without losing the essence of who they are. So what's that evolution like and how can you use performance marketing to drive brand growth? And that's typically to position you for some type of an exit or event. And so I love working with brands too on then how are we driving sales and getting that healthy EBITDA and building that the right brand strategies, but also the right infrastructure strategies and business strategies around that. So come to our website. We'd love to talk with you.
Yeah, and I'll link to everything in the show notes, but it's Carey Grange, Carey Grange. So check her out. I feel like, Carey, we're just getting started. I could talk to you for another several hours about this. And so we'll have to schedule round 2 in the near future. But thank you so much for your time. Tons of fun.
Would love it. Thanks for including me.
Absolutely. And as always, thank you for tuning in. We'd love to hear from you. Leave us that review on iTunes if you've not done so. Share this episode with a friend who might find it valuable. And with that, until next time, thank you for listening.